So yeah, this is exercise 3. Again, we already went through kind of setting up our file and downloading the content. And I had brought all this video content into my Premiere file. So that's where we're starting. And let me see the next couple of things we're going to be doing. So like previewing content and kind of subclip management, placing previewing, sure. Timeline stuff, right? Okay. So I think let's just go ahead and start out fresh here. We'll delete whatever is on the timeline, right? So we're just kind of starting fresh. And this is just also a recap, but my timeline is just 1920 by 1080. So if you're not sure if yours was set to that correctly, you could, click in your media thing here and hit the tilde. And you can look at the info for your sequence there, right? So if it's 4K, it's fine. It's just like it's not going to look the same as we put stuff in. So the first thing we could do is take a look at like the different ways in which we can be bringing content into our timeline, right? Now that we have this established sequence, quote unquote, right? And I think it might be helpful to stick with just a 1080p for now. So I think the other one I did Leaf, the other class, but we could do, how about we all start with Field MP4. So if you find that, and let's go ahead and drag that over to the timeline. And this might happen too, right? If you don't have every single clip specifically the same as the content settings or the timeline settings that you set previously. So whatever clip you might have dragged over to establish the sequence, right? You wouldn't be getting an issue like this with that. But so I would just say that you can go ahead and keep existing as long as you have 1080p already. And I'm just going to uncheck always ask for now for me. Right. So the thing we can notice here is that if we can grab that timeline playhead, we have pretty chunky length here, 24 seconds. And we get playback with the space bar. And we should have audio, although I don't know what this audio. Yeah, I don't think there's really anything with that. The dimensions. Yeah, you probably have like a 4K. So what you can do, Grant, is click on your sequence, right? It's the one that has like multiple tracks. It looks like multiple tracks of the playhead. Do you see that? Huh? No. No, I don't. So you just got to scroll up or down. Yeah, list view is the easier way. We'll turn up the brightness so you can see. So just scroll up or down. Click on project. Right, and so you brought the folder in, so that's why those show up like that. But yeah, click on your sequence, and then just go to sequence. Just in case. Sequence settings, and then just manually type in 1920 by 1080. And that should be good enough for now. Okay, so yeah, and again, that's just, you could change things there, but so with this exercise today, we're not going to be managing any audio. So if you bring over clips like this, it's kind of notable to see that it's going to bring over the entire length of the clip, right? However long it is, as well as the audio track that's associated to it, if there is an audio track, right? Some of them, like this leaf, you can see the little icon there in list view, how there's no green audio track. So, you know, if you brought it over like this directly, that's fine. You could right click and go to unlink, which would separate the audio from the video. And then you could like select the audio and delete it, right? And then you can go about managing the track as you would. But there's actually a way that we can work more efficiently over time. And this is really attuned to recycling content. So let's go ahead and just go back. So Command Z or delete that off your timeline. And I believe you guys have the workspace similar to this right now. So if we were to instead double click on the field over here in our project files, this will open it up in our source preview window. Okay. And a couple things to note here is that this is literally just previewing files, right? And the window over here on the right would be playing back and previewing things that are actually on your timeline. However, both of them have something that you might want to manage if your computer is slower or older. Right here where mine says full, yours might say 1/2. This is actually relating to like the playback quality, the resolution that your graphics card is going to be showing you that preview. So, I mean, first thing to note is that it's a pretty small window already. So if it were like a 4K piece of content, having full resolution really doesn't do you any justice anyway, because it's such a small preview window, unless you were to like hit the tilde and watch it larger. But if you have a older or slower computer, what you could do is reduce this down on not just the source monitor, but also your video monitor there on the right. I'm wondering if I can shrink my window down here. I have a zoom window up here. Okay. Right? They call it program monitor. But so once we've double clicked this and we've got this field up here, you should be able to click and drag around on the playhead there as well. Right? And there's nothing really here that we can associate to like something different from another area, really, right? It's all pretty much similar. So what I might suggest is let's just take like a 4-second clip, right? So we can start at maybe like, if you click in the time there, we could start at like exactly 9 seconds perhaps, right? And then this is kind of an interesting feature that we also had in Audition, but it was a little bit more hidden. Now, not only do we have the shortcut keys of I for marking in and O for marking out, but they're also the shortcuts are right there. So let's mark an in point at 9 seconds. And then we can scroll over. I'm talking very poorly today. Trying to talk too fast. Let's do like 14 seconds, right? Now, you can hit tab or return to enter a number if you typed it. And we can hit O on the keyboard. And that'll give us literally like an input range and an output range. And normally, if we set it up properly, we could hit the space bar to like then play that and loop that back. But as of right now, you might not have that playback as looping. So you'd want to hit this little plus button here, the bottom right of the panel, and you can drag down your loop playback button. It's this little, rectangle arrow on the left-hand side. We can put that wherever you would like. Hit OK. And interestingly, mine was already on, but I changed my window layout so you didn't see it. But then also, let's just preemptively go over to our playback program monitor here, and we can add it over here as well. Because we're going to be trying to look at this with that ability in mind, right? So yeah, now if I hit the space bar while I'm over here in our source monitor, right? You guys can follow along and see how we can view it, but then it's also repeating. It's pretty slow footage, right? That's okay. We're just going to be bringing that down and checking it out. So what's interesting is after we've limited it here, like we could still totally put our playhead anywhere to preview, right? This whole window is for previewing. But what's nice is if we decided that this is what we want, we could point at this little drag video only and click and hold, and we can drag that to our timeline. So like V1 on our timeline. And it's only going to put that exact 5 seconds of content, right? So what I found was interesting is, I guess I'll walk you through it. I don't think it used to be this way, but another way you can go about this is asking yourself, right? Say this is like a 20-minute long video and you're never going to need content outside of this spanse that you've set. What we could do is, instead of relating back to this field with all this extra space every time, we could right click up here in this monitor after setting the input and output, and we can go to make subclip. And so this is going to be like pretty pivotal if you guys are going to be recycling content over and over, or tweaking a file and then working it and tweaking it and working it. You can save different iterations to your project's media browser, rather than like just the content you've dragged into the program, right? So once you've clicked make subclip, it's going to give you this option, right? And it's literally talking about the beginning and the end of your clip. So right here, we've already set the beginning and end to this point in time of this video, right? But the subclip itself gives us the option to allow us to unpack content or not unpack content. So for right now, I think it's good to click on restrict trims so that you can see what that's actually going to do. So you can hit OK. And going down here, you can see that it creates a new icon for that subclip. So you can kind of somewhat differentiate it, but from the others. And that clip is now actually 5 seconds long, and mine's actually 5:01, so I must have messed up somewhere. So whatever, I'm fine with that for right now. But this clip, if we click and drag this over to our timeline, right, and put it on like V2 somewhere, well, it's notable that the audio came with it, so that's fine. But what I wanted you guys to check out is, if you were to click the edge of the bounds of that track, right? This is a way, just like in Audition, we were able to like trim down content. Well, if we know that that originally had more to it, you would think like, oh, I want more of that video to come back. You cannot, because you saved this by trimming the bounds of that clip. That's literally these bounds here, the in and out. So I'm just reviewing this like by, declaring a few different ways. So now if we were to go back to the field clip, right? You could double click on it, bring it up in the playhead there. What's interesting is like, no matter if I switch out of it and go back to it, this in and out is still there. So you don't necessarily have to save subclips every time you want to limit an area, at least anymore. I feel like this might not have been there before. I can't recall. But now if you go back to a clip, it'll still be constrained like that. So if I were to want to bring over that section, you could literally just drag it over from the files, and it's still going to limit it to that 5 seconds like it would before. Except by not limiting the bounds, we do obviously then have more of that duration that we could play with. So it's a little bit of a tricky aspect to be thinking about. So, I mean, when in doubt, if you are going to save subclips, it could be helpful to just, for now, turn off the restricting the trim so that, 5 seconds of field gets saved, but then if we bring it over to utilize, we still can add some of that back if we ever needed to. It just depends on what it is you're working on, right? But okay, so this is talking about the different ways we're able to bring content in. I'm going to get rid of that one. So yeah, I think it's still fine if we bring down just the video for that like 5 seconds or whatever that we made up. And then we can go ahead and select some other content to bring in. And let's see, let's go for, maybe I'll open this up to double check. Let's just utilize this robot because it is larger and it doesn't have any audio associated to it either. So first of all, we can double click it to open it up in the source monitor there, right? Just to see what it is. But just for fun here, let's just avoid trimming it there and we'll just bring it into our timeline, fresh, raw. You could either drag it over or drag it down because there's no audio with it anyway, right? The audio is actually grayed out there on the source monitor. So what I'd like for you guys to do is just bring it down and put it right after the first clip ends. And it should snap like this. If it's not snapping, you can let me know. Maybe there's a setting we got to turn on, but by default, the snap should go to ends of the tracks pretty easily. But if we then grab our playhead and drag over, right, like if we're playing this, you'll notice that this robot is definitely not looking like the actual full file, right? It's zoomed in because this is actually a 4K clip on a standard HD timeline. So quite literally, 4 times the resolution. So we need to manage it in some way. And I think the first process that you all should be aware of is just like the quick and easy way of just right-clicking on that track, on that clip. And then both of these work right now. I feel like one of them should be the standard that we go to, but scale to frame size or set to frame size, either of these have been working. And that's just going to constrain it down. So maybe if there are different aspect ratios, maybe those different options would matter in that way, but right. So now if we scrub back and forth, like we should see it does flip right over to the robot, right? But there is no transitional component here. So, you know, the first clip was 5 seconds. Let's go ahead and make this clip like 5 seconds as well. So what I'd like for you guys to do is go in here to your timeline and put in here 6 seconds. So it would be 6:00 and hit enter or tab. All right, so it'll go over 1 second. And we could either grab the razor tool like Audition, and because our timeline is right there, we should be able to click and it's going to crop exactly to the 6 seconds. Or if I do a Command Z, we could use just our selection tool and drag that over. It should also snap to that time on the timeline. Right. So what did we do there? If we just analyze that for a quick second, this beginning part of the robot clip that we now have, that we now should have, is not the beginning of that file. It's 1 second in, right? Like we always could bring that back out. That's going to become important here in a second, but I want us to walk through why that is first here briefly. So now after 6, the second marker, and we've brought that in, let's put this robot back over to the field file. And now let's put our time to 10 seconds. And we can trim the robot down so that it goes from 5 seconds to 10 seconds on the timeline. Right. And this could be a good time to, you know, reflect on how we're using our space. And there, you know, there is the different workspaces or the different windows you could turn on and off. Really depends. Like I already mentioned to you guys, you could right click on that learn that popped up, close that. There was a couple other menu options here. So what's worth noting though is I'm going to only have you guys put in like one audio track. It might come in as like a stereo track. So we really don't need all of these different layers down here visible. And there's a lot more space here that we're not using, right? So this is like worth noting, you know, if you're on a smaller screen like a laptop, it could be worth, you know, hiding your toolbar here, your dock, if you wanted more space. But what I really advocate for is if you hover between the audio and the video part here on the timeline, you can get that divider. And I'd just say bring that all the way down so it's just like A1, A2 visible. And then for the remainder of these video, we can take this divider here all the way on the right side, way over here, and you could drag that down and that'll expand your view for the video files, the video tracks, right? And once you've done this, you'll be able to, usually if you have large enough screen space, you'll see like the video previews there, right? Like this, not video preview, but a still of what that clip looks like. Right. And so I want us to go through kind of like a basic transition, adding that here. And we could go up to the edit panel and go find our options for transitions, but there is this quick way. If you right click on the divider there between the two clips, we do have an option right there for the default transition. And if we grab this scroll bar and drag it over, we can kind of zoom in a little bit. And we should notice that this transition component does now look like it's going over top of both clips, right? Doesn't seem like it's very long. So let's go ahead and do this. How about if we set our timeline to, again, 6 seconds, like we did at one point, we could then use that as our guide to grab the right edge of that cross dissolve, and we can snap it over to our 1 second, right? And that option there, it says at the bottom, it's telling you how much it's adding to it, but that doesn't really give you much of a sense of what it's doing. But if we know that this is evenly dragging out on the other side as well, if we're setting it evenly here at 6 seconds, which is 1 second in from the median there, then the beginning is probably 4 seconds, right? So it should be like a 2 second long dissolve. So now if you click and drag your playhead, so you right click, apply, and that's all you really need to do. But in terms of having it set exactly, and you know, I'm wondering, did I already adjust this? Oh, I did, didn't I? I was thinking I was walking you guys into this issue. That's fine. We can look at it here in a second. So, yep, all I did there, Grant, was go to my timeline and just manually type this out, 600. But you can just click and drag until you get to that time, right? Or if you get close, everybody should like try hitting their keys on their keyboard, the left and right arrows, just to see that that actually is literally 1 frame at a time. So yeah, I'm just using that as a marker so that as I drag over the dissolve, it snaps. And if it's evenly doing it, then I know that it has gone over 1 second on the other side as well. So does it matter that it's that specific? I mean, not as of right now, because there's no other clips or anything happening. It's just preference, right? Maybe you watch this back and realize it's got to be longer or something. I don't know. But does everybody have that ability to scrub through this and see that playing back fine, right? Everybody's good? Anybody need help? Okay, because we're going to keep stacking this up. So the next thing I want us to do is, right, so the beginning of that's fine. Let's bring over another clip. And let's see which one we'll do. How about kaleidoscope? So we'll double click on kaleidoscope so we get it up here in our source. And then we're only going to drag down the video only. And let's slap it right here at the beginning of the robot, like where the robot ends. Right? And this starts at 10 seconds. Let's pretend like we want to keep up with that scheme for whatever reason. So we'll go to 15 seconds and cut it there. Use V to switch to my selection tool, select and delete, right? So we have now 3 clips. They're all 5 seconds piece, right? Pretty similar process. Similar, right? Not identical that we did for the other 2. Now, what I'd like us to try is manually adding a different type of transition. And to get there, we could do one of two things. This is up to you guys. You could go up to Window and you can turn on effects. I personally like to just toggle my workspace when I want to shift the mode, but sometimes I leave it in one or the other and just kind of work back and forth. I'm just kind of pointing out that some of these kind of preset workspaces might be more preferable to you, right? So if we click on the editing, or not editing, effects, pretty similar setup, although at the right-hand side now we have effects, right? So what I'd like for you guys to do is drop down this little drop down for video transitions, or you could double click on it. And let's do one of these iris ones, which I did with the other class. It's easily unique, you know, and we'll do the diamond, iris diamond. Now, what I thought would be kind of nice is if you had the two clips selected and you double clicked on it and it would apply, but it doesn't. But I will note here that we want to click and drag this down to overlap with our robot and kaleidoscope. So as we drag it down, you should be able to notice that there's a difference between adding it to like the middle or end of a track. And right here, it's only allowing me to put it at the beginning of kaleidoscope, right? Whereas if I hover it over between the robot and the field, it's allowing me to do the whole crossover between the two. But with this one, it's only allowing me to do the beginning of the kaleidoscope. Does anybody know why? Yeah, Anthony?
I would guess maybe because we cut off the end of the robot.
That's solid logic, and that is the answer, but it's slightly backwards. So if I drag this kaleidoscope up, you guys can follow me if you would like. You just drag it up to the clip above. We should be able to notice that we did cut that robot, yes. So the robot could go out further, which this is actually not the problem. This is actually done correctly. So it was allowing us to apply the transition to the kaleidoscope side because there was enough footage of the robot layer that would continue over into the kaleidoscope behind the scenes, right? And we know this because if we drag it up, you can see that there is more to this footage. However, I had you guys just quickly put the kaleidoscope in, and there is nothing more at the beginning. And this is a very kind of like vital aspect to be acknowledging. So what I want for you guys to do is let's go over 1 second from the beginning of this. And how do we know where the beginning is? Rather than like, you know, scrubbing and stuff like this and trying to get exactly, you guys could hold shift while you're pulling this playhead. And if you're not familiar with this, I'd like you to go through just so you can see that in action, because you're going to be able to utilize this a lot, just like in Audition. So if we go to the beginning, we know that's 10 seconds. So then we could say, okay, go to 11 seconds, right? We click the timeline clock there, type in 11, just so that our playhead bumps over. And now we could either cut it with the razor blade or drag this over the kaleidoscope. So once we've done that, we should acknowledge that there's at least 1 second of footage at the beginning of kaleidoscope that we can access, right? So Now we can drag this back down to where the robot was at the very end, like butt that up against there again. And this time, if we go to grab that iris diamond video transition, we should have that ability to place it anywhere we want on those clips. And the goal really here is overlapping like this. So once you get it to overlap, let's see if you can also make that transition one second on each side with these 2 full seconds. So yeah, so I think you just got to go change the time to like 11. We're going to go like at 1 second. Yep. Right. And then we can drag the starting point of the almost, right? So that would be the starting point, but what I guess I mean is grab the edge and cut it in by 1 second. So there is like that 1 second left there now, right? If we need it, which is kind of what we're doing this for. Now if you drag it down, yep. And I go to the window and oh, pop it there. That's fine. Yeah, then you can drag the iris over top of both, and it should allow to go right to south. Yep. And that reasoning is because before there wasn't anything for the kaleidoscope to reference on this side. I don't know how I went through it last class, but it did allow me to place it, but it only said like it doesn't have enough footage. Let me see if I could just replicate it really quick up here, just for the hell of it. So if I just slap up a couple things and I bring this down, yes, it will let me put it here, right? But this is the true end of pink and the true beginning of abstract. So if I put that there, which I don't even know if I did, no. It might give you this error, and this is worth kind of pretending to go through so you guys can see it. This is the error that it would give you: insufficient media. So you can actually hit OK, even though there wasn't enough media. But now if we were to look at this spot, see, both clips are moving. But now once we get to this spot, it's kind of cutting out over top of her face. So I guess you wouldn't really notice it, but there's no more parts of that clip of pink that are moving. And there's no part of the green swirl that's moving here. It's static until we get past that threshold. Then you can see it starts to move. So depending on the length of these different transitions you make, you do have to have enough content that leads up to it, or that trails off from it in order to have that kind of seamless transition. Does that make sense? And there is more technical terms for these sort of things. Like if you're going to be shooting video, you want to, that action moment, you generally want to wait for a few seconds so you have that like extra footage that you could rely on if you needed to. That's why if you see like shows or movies where they are doing a mock setup of a set, they'll like wait for a second after they say action and then they'll do it. Like they'll pause for a moment. It's for this kind of moment of editing that could be done, right? So, okay, anybody last call here? Did anybody not get this? Okay, so another thing I want to point out is with this effect here, this transition kind of thing, I'm getting a red spot on my timeline. So if I were to bring it before that red and hit play, I'm curious, do any of you have like a lagginess associated to that? I have a lag from the time I press play to the time it actually plays, but that's it. Does anybody else have an actual lag? I'll keep asking because we're going to keep compounding this. Okay. So that's kind of dealing with managing content, right? We're able to bring video and or audio down together or separately, constrain it to the frame if our content is larger than the frame. And then we can kind of do some transitionary effects. So this is kind of like basic video editing, right? Like if you're going to do stuff for another class, this is almost like somewhat of the extent that they're going to be asking you to do things. Video classes tend to be more about like storyboarding and like coming up with a narrative. This class we're doing non-narrative, right? Like how much crazy, weird, fucked up shit can you make, essentially? So I think the next thing I'd like for us to go over, let me double check, make sure I'm not skipping something. Transitions, effects, right. So yeah, I'm going to add this effects thing in here. So similar to my other class, let's go over and find this pink video clip. And there's no audio associated to it. So let's just drag this over and let's just have it so that it, yeah, let's have it so it starts at the beginning of the robot, right? So that's exactly at 5 seconds. Now, it's almost the length that we need if we were to have this go all the way to the end to, actually, my kaleidoscope ended up being 14 because I cut into it by a second, but then I never fixed it. So not that it's a super big deal, but if we were to keep all these clips 5 seconds each, we would want this to be 5 seconds. So how could we get this pink clip to extend its time so that we can have it be the full duration? Because right now I can't drag it out any further. There's no more film, right? Totally. Does anybody know like a quick approach for that? Yeah.
The speed of duration thing. Just right click speed of duration.
Okay. So if we right click and we go to speed duration. Yep. We can see that, yeah, there is a speed option there as a percentage or duration. And conveniently, if we know we want this to be exactly 10 seconds, right? Because each of our 2 clips underneath of it, if we're trying to match that up, we could just put in here 10 seconds. That is totally one way of doing it, yeah. And if we hit okay, we should be able to see that change. And I actually can't recall what these options, how these options differ. I don't do enough video work where I have that in my mind, which I should. I'm going to take a screenshot there. I'll try to put that on like the vocab for future courses and such. So if we hit OK, we should see that pop over, right? Now there is actually a separate way to manage that. This right-clicking stuff, anything that you could access here, is also accessible in the effect controls panel. So if I were to just hit Command Z to undo, and I select that pink clip, right? We should be able to see if you guys have the effect controls on. And if you don't, that's probably because you didn't switch over to the effects workspace, right? But so if you wanted to stay with your workspace, you could always turn on the effect controls here. And this is where, so like here, for example, if I do a reset the saved layout, I think this is what it is. Yeah, this might be what you guys see by default, right? We're not using this Lumetri scopes. We can right click on that and close it. We could right click on the audio clip mixer and close that. And if you do that, maybe if you just keep these two things here, that could be a little bit of an easier wave flow. I am curious, some of you who have used Premiere, do you know why it is that I select this clip, right? I can see the options here in effect controls. However, if I go back to my source and then don't even do anything else, but just go back to effect controls, why is that collapsed and how do you uncollapse it? I just don't really grasp like why they would have that here. I'm not sure what the point of it is of having that do that. Because I will note, if you could look down here, my timeline still has that pink selected. So yeah, Grant, you'll have to just check back in with this video clip.
Yeah, I'll come tomorrow during that time.
Yeah, sure. You'll want to use this, and then there'll be notes I'll put at the end too about project stuff. So see you next week. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why that is, but if we re-click on pink, it would pop back up. I don't know if that's intentional or. The question is like, if we had our pink, one of our clips selected, and for some reason we wanted to go to our source monitor, and then we went back to effect controls, we don't have any of the controls.
Isn't it because the source is different? It's okay.
Even if the source is the same, though, it collapses it.
Yeah, it's collapsing, which I just now realized that if I click on this, it'll pop open. But Kaleidoscope, it doesn't. Is that because I can't see it? So I can't see it there. If I click over here, can I see it? So like things are pretty weird. I don't really know why they're collapsing. But anyway, so yeah, we're focusing on the pink for the time being. So if we have our playhead on it somewhere, I want us to cover a couple different things here. First is that this effect controls panel, it actually shows a third timeline. I mean, if you count the source timeline, it might be a fourth, but this is actually in sync, not like the band, the boy band. It's in sync with these timelines, right? So it actually is in reference to them. And we're going to get to why that matters here momentarily. But if we wanted to expand the time, like the duration, like we just went over there, we should have that option here as well, although I haven't went over it. So it looks like if we just drop down the time mapping here on the left-hand side, we should see a speed icon, right? And by default, it should not be blue, just white. That's fine. That's what we want, I think, unless it's not going to let us change anything. Okay, so maybe it has to change. I don't know why. Time remapping doesn't do anything?
What are you trying to do?
Change the duration. I thought we had the access right here. On here? I mean, it's not looking like it's actually making any points. It's very odd. Okay, so yeah, maybe we can have like a beginning and end. Like your 2-year point. And then can we change the time? Doesn't look like it. Anybody ever use this? I'm also wondering if we have like a time duration thing over here. Bummer. This is killing the demo, huh? Nobody's sure. Speed duration here. I would imagine that's probably the same thing we just went over there. Flip, speed, duration, yeah. So speed and duration. I mean, this is saying speed, right? But it doesn't say duration. And it won't even let us go down. So I'm kind of at a loss. Why that might be. All right, well, how about we just go back to the previous standard? I'll try to look that up too. So if we right click on it, do speed duration, we do 10 seconds, just so we can continue on, get through some other stuff that I can show you how to do. All right, so let's go back to something that I know is going to work fine. Yeah, Anthony?
You can try clicking the like little yellow box in sequence. Pink.
In this here? Oh, this?
Yeah, make it tiny making speed. And then see if that. That's how you do it in this timeline, which is always up on using anyway.
So time remapping, is that just grabbing the edges then?
Yeah, like you can use the pen tool to make keyframes like that.
Uh-huh. But how would that change the time? You're saying with the pen tool? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely several ways, as we know from Photoshop, right, of doing things, but so yeah, position. What's the standard on these? Linear. Okay. So yeah. I don't know. I'd have to look at that more. Did I just make a point? Yeah. Okay, so kind of recapping here. What we're going through is putting pink on, starting at 5 seconds. We right-clicked on it, extended the duration till 10, from whatever 7 something to 10 seconds. So it goes to the end of our kaleidoscope here. Okay, and then if you follow along here, we're going to just have the pink selected. And the first thing I want us to acknowledge is like, it's cutting off the edges of pink, right? But it's not really cutting the edges off. It's that pink is actually a taller clip. We can see that if we double click and bring it in the source monitor, right? It's actually just a vertical clip. This is why it's challenging to not cringe when you see people like filming at a birthday party and they're vertical. But you know. So if we go back to this effect controls and click on pink, what we can do is change the scale and positioning to try and get it to accommodate our space that we have, so it doesn't look so drastically different. And one approach that I would suggest is first changing the scale, so that if we click in there, we could actually click and just change the number, but if you click and drag to the right, it'll allow you to ramp up the percentage, and we're just going to go until it touches the border, right? The constraints there, the left and the right. And then I'm going to go through the same thing I did with the other class, which I think is a kind of a fun follow-up here. Because not only does this work for the time being, but it's just a little weird, right? It kind of looks like if we grab our playhead and just scrub it, it looks kind of like there's too much room above her head, and then it kind of bobbles, right? Or it kind of goes down the whole way. So if we wanted to, we could adjust this so that her head's in the same spot the whole time. But I think what would be more fun is to show you guys a first instance of using keyframes by starting this pink off with seeing the top of the frame. And then as it progresses through the clip, have it end to where her face is in frame, right? So what we could do is work the positioning, right? And the first thing I would recommend is changing the Y position to a higher value, right? If we click and drag a ton, we can see that we can bring this all the way down. Mine's somewhere around like 17, 19 or something like this. My Y value for the position. Everybody get this? I don't see pink on a couple of yours. JB, are you good over there? Are you good over there? Okay. So now that we've set this to where we want it, what I would suggest is we need to get to the beginning frame if we want it to be the first frame. And just by looking right here, I can't quite see, it doesn't seem like it's the beginning, but up here, it's kind of hard to tell, right? Well, if you grab this playhead, just know that like you won't be able to snap to the beginning unless you hold shift. But if you use this playhead and go to the left, it literally will go all the way into the very first frame because you can't actually go further here if we only have that one clip selected, right? This is just limiting us to the pink reel. So once we are all the way back to the very first frame, what we could do is toggle on this quote unquote animation stopwatch that's here, but specifically we want to click that on for the position. Okay. And once we've clicked that, it'll turn blue, but you should notice that a little blue icon here is popped up. And on the timeline, which is a little tricky to see, there is actually a little diamond. We just only see half of it. If you click and drag it out, right, we can see that that diamond is in fact a full diamond. But in this case, we do want to have it just all the way to the left so that it's at the first frame. And then what we could do is go over here somewhere, right? And click another frame, keyframe, which is literally, you can establish another keyframe in two different ways. So first, if I do Command Z, you can see that this is not yet blue. But because our stopwatch is on, this pops up as an option. Notice how we don't have that option for scale or any of these other ones because we haven't turned that on, right? So once we click that button there, we get one to pop on the timeline, but we could also just change whatever value we want. And that will automatically add a new keyframe. And so what I'd like for you guys to do is have a keyframe that brings this woman's face into view, right, with just a little bit of headroom there, and then have that be the last frame. So you can bring this all the way over, right? And the point that's worth going over here, which is why I put it off into the center, right? I made this keyframe like right here, but I want it to be at the very end of the clip. For example, right? So if I click and drag that, yeah, sure, I could put it at the end, but notice my Y values changing again, right? Because it's a calculation that's being performed. If you were to drag this playhead and look at that Y value as it's changing over time, right, you can see that it's just going based on time. What's the percentage it needs to change? So if we do move that over there, we would want to bring our playhead all the way to that point. And it's a little hard to see, huh? Yeah, go ahead.
You turn off the, or is there a way to turn off the thing where when I drag it all the way over, it just goes into the next clip?
I'm not sure. What I was just going to recap, though, I think will be a good intermediary for all of us because I realized the very last frame is black. So what I would do is manually click and drag this playhead at the top all the way over till it's black, right? And then just push left on your keyboard's arrow key one time, one frame. And now that's the last frame. Then we could just click add keyframe, assuming you haven't had one before that. And then you would just manually modify that Y value to be where you would want her head. Right? So now, if we went to the very beginning of this clip on our timeline down here, I push I on the keyboard, and then I put it at the end here and push O. I can hit loop. And then if I go to play this back, we should see that it does come in, but it is quite a long process to get to that point. Right? It's somewhere, let's see, if we go all the way in, yeah, like I'll even hit M on my keyboard as it's playing, right? You could hit a marker while it's playing. Some reason I didn't get the marker to come up here though. Oh, there we go. Let's try that. Right. So that's not very accurate, but it's close. So somewhere about there. All right. So that's like eight seconds and 11 frames in. That's kind of a long time. It's over 3 seconds where it's just pink, right? I don't think that's a problem. But what I think would be interesting is number one, let's put another transition on that. So as you guys are kind of managing your space, remember you could always collapse these drop downs if it's getting too confusing. So like right now, I just want to focus on video transitions to add, right? Because at the beginning, this goes from my robot. It's like field into a robot, and it's barely a robot, and then pink, right? It's pretty annoying. So if we put a transition on this of some sort, let's do maybe just like a dissolve. Put a dissolve on the first frame here. And I knew that I put a marker here at 8:11 as like how long until we actually see the woman. Putting markers is nice because I can hold shift and snap to that point, just like the end bounds of a clip. And you can then click that transition and drag it all the way wherever you want, right? And I can hold, but this is actually not snapping like I thought it would be. Very odd. But now if I let that play, we should see, let's go back, play. Right. And we're going to do a little bit more to this too, but I want to make sure everybody's at par. Oh, how do you got going on here? Mhm. Oh yeah, you're working on the transition thing?
Yeah.
Yep. So I think the one thing to do, this is what I was mentioning before, a little weird to toggle around though, is like these. Do you know how to bring a clip in without the audio coming in?
No.
So we can just briefly look at it, right? So our media right here, kaleidoscope. No, that's it just got named that, right? So if we were to double click that, I'll bring it up here, we could utilize this little feature, right? So if we were to just click that, then only the videos would be there.
Okay.
That's the one thing to help if you're trying to avoid getting unnecessary audio, right? And then if we go back to effects, if you are dragging this onto a clip, let's do this. You're halfway to do it. Right, so we bring our space up a little more. We can have a little more of a view. And the same thing with this, maybe we can see a little more. And then what you need to do is just drag it over median. But yeah, it's not working on both, right? So that should be an indicator that there is a little bit of the paint that is before it. And we cut it, you know, we cut the paint a little bit. But the robot, this is the end of the robot. Otherwise, we could have the ability of seeing on the other side.
Okay.
So what we would need to do is go to here, which should be called shift, snap, right? And then we can do like 14. And then we can bring this in, go snap to that point. So we know it's like exactly a second, right? Bring that over. And now when we go to place that, it should have that option.
Okay.
And so I don't know if that exactly in a second. Let's see. Should be able to like grab that, bring it out. I don't know. We'd have to go over it again step by step. You can see how we have that motion now, and both of them are moving.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and then we're on to another step. So I think what you could do is utilize this kaleidoscope in the same way that we're utilizing the paint up here. So we cut this at like 15 seconds, I think. Right, and then this is what we're playing with now, right? So the logic we went through here was just having the having the paint move. But so you could also have the kaleidoscope move. You would just need to be getting into effect controls. Right? Is there anybody else that didn't get the movement working? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if you want to follow along, I'll go over the step again up here. So all of you dudes, I'll just go back and I'll okay, so you have the clip kind of prepped, right?
Yeah.
So you all have like that clip that's ready for this. But so what I did, let me go back. Okay, so we're starting fresh here. So I see a couple keyframes, but I'm just going to start as if we didn't have keyframes, right? And so all we're doing is selecting that top clip, right? And if we open up our effect controls up here, we should have these options available, right, for our pink. And if we, so for yours over there, it's kaleidoscope, right? But then if we drop that down for motion, we should have the position available as a modification, as well as the scale. And what I advocated for was to move the Y position so that some of this could be out of frame. And for yours over there, you already have like something that's in the frame. So what you could try is first changing the scale to like 400% or something like that, right? Because then it's way bigger than it needs to be. So then could you get yours to have the kaleidoscope start in the top left corner of the image, and then at the end, it'll shift up to the bottom right? Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of playing with these bounds. So if I want this to start at the top like this, and I think I also changed the scale, right? It was smaller. So I changed this so it was larger. This is my baseline, right? This is where I want it to start from. You could add keyframes before this and then change them after, but the way I like to do it is getting it to where I know I want it to be starting from, because then there's less to like redo. So at this point, we could then click the toggle for our position. If all we're doing is changing the position on the screen right now, all we need to do is turn on that toggle, right? Except we do want that to be the first frame. And so because there's no other keyframes here right now, moving this all the way over won't actually change any values. So it's safe to do. And this is something I don't think I went over. So everybody wants to double check this on the screen. I drag this all the way over, which is fine, right? But notice this is not blue. Yet when I drag this all the way to the left, it turns blue. I can't go left on my keyboard any further. It'll go to the previous clip, right? So this is a clear indicator that that's where my keyframe is. So as you add, say some of your clips, you might have lots and lots of different effects. I would advocate that you would try and do some of the timing the same place, right? So you can have your options available to you without going through to different frames. So now what I would say is, if you're adding your second keyframe, drag your playhead all the way to the right-hand side, right? And it should, when you let go, the clip should disappear, right? And then you can hit left on the keyboard one time to get that back in frame, right? And once you're on that last frame, you could literally then just click here to add the keyframe, right? I'm on my last frame, click, boom, keyframe was added. And then I can make my adjustment, or as I was kind of going over before, as long as I'm on the frame that I want, if I make a change to this value, it'll automatically put a keyframe for me because the tracking is on, quote unquote, animation is on. So if I put this all the way up here like so, boom, keyframe was added by itself. Right? Okay, so yeah, it looks like you got the other keyframe, right? So if you drag your timeline over, yep, perfect. You get some movement going?
I can also only see files from the which one are you using?
Oh yeah, you're totally fine. So you change the scale,
Yeah,
but you've got to drag this to the beginning, the playhead,
okay.
right, and let go. So this is the very first frame. So what we want to do is click the position toggle. Yep. Right. And that automatically created a keyframe for us. And you can see it on the timeline, but you could also see that this is an indicator. It's blue. So if you move away from that for a second, watch when I move my cursor, or I'll let you let go of that. And then, so if you use the right arrow key to move forward one frame, notice that that's not blue any further, right?
Okay.
So now if I go back, that's the frame that has the blue. So it's important because if you were to be off even one frame, it would create another keyframe, and then things could be like jerky,
Okay.
like flopping around. So, are you starting in any specific position? How do we drop that down even further to 500?
Looks like 400.
Well, what I'm wondering is like this: if we did something like that,
How are you doing?
dragging it
Oh,
like a slider, right? And then this way we could bring it so that frame is all the way over the edge, right? And now if you click your playhead and drag it all the way to the right,
like this, or like that?
playhead,
Oh, okay.
and drag it all the way, yep, and let go, it should go black. you gotta go one frame back. So if you click the arrow key, right? And now that you know that this is the last frame, you can go ahead and make your adjustment. So say, change the position so that bottom right is right here. Right, so you just click and drag it like a ton. And you can let go and keep dragging, keep dragging. And notice that first time you made a change, it added a keyframe for you,
Okay,
right? So you want to just get that to be at the bottom. Yep. You got it, it's definitely big, right?
yeah.
And then the other one is, yep,
Yeah.
you can, but it'll be interesting to see, right? It'll almost be like a filter as we go through this last process. So now, if you were to hit play. Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying.
No, you're good.
I just pressed that.
Yep, space bar. Right, so now we're gonna see like this random trailing happening. And what's cool is you have this view up, you can see that playhead, you can see those values changing.
Okay,
So that's what's important to grasp here is that this beginning frame, it shows you that's where a keyframe is. That's what the values are. And then boom. That's the other one, that's those values. And it just does the math for you.
okay, thanks.
Is anybody else? Yeah. Yeah. It's just if you have another keyframe and you have, yeah, so you see you have 3 keyframes and scale and then 3, right. So if you didn't want it to be bumping around, you would just want to be finding out where it is that it's not correctly. So right there, it's going down.
Yeah.
So you would want to get rid of this one probably. Right. So it's one of these, it just depends on what you want it to be doing. And you're still. So you don't actually drag that, you drag the values. And you don't click in, if you click in, you can, but that would be like a manual type. Yeah. Yeah, and you want to always just make sure you are on the frame that has a keyframe. Yeah, because if you were like a frame, you know, if you're a couple frames over, I'll give you guys a demonstration where this could be important. So say I bring my cursor like here, I'm like, okay, that's the end. Well, that's not highlighted, right? But pretend like I didn't notice and I go to make my change and I'm like, yeah, you know, whatever. If I go back and play this now, watch what happens when it gets to that point. See it like skip. It's literally 2 different keyframes. So it's going to do whatever the math is between those keyframes. So here's one, which is 2061, and this one's 843. So it is important to acknowledge that those keyframe locations are based on that indicator. It's just a nice guide for you. So, okay. Let's do a Command S real quick, save this, or do a file save as if you haven't done that. Save it to your folder. And then I want us to do one other effect that we should be covering for the exercise. So it's underneath video effects. And then under keying. And what we're looking for is this ultra key. I'll zoom in here for a quick second because it can be weird to find if you're unfamiliar. So again, no matter where you're at and what you're working on, you could follow along with this. So just go up to your effects panel, click on the video effects, click on keying, and we want to locate ultra key. Right? And so once we have that located, what we can do is just literally either click the top layer that we want to apply this to, and we could double click Ultra key, or we could literally just drag and drop it. The drag and drop can be easier if you don't have it selected. It'll just go to whatever you have that it's pointing to. So by default, this doesn't actually get established as like a green screen effect, this keyed effect. We actually have to tell it what color to key. So just like a green screen or blue screen, if you want to film something in front of those and then get rid of that color that's behind on the wall, right? You would have to then choose that color. So in this case, because her outfit here has the same color as the background, once we key out the background, she'll kind of be like floating, right? So what we need to do is have that clip selected. And then over here in our effect controls, as soon as we added that Ultra key to that clip on our timeline, Ultra key popped up here in our effect controls for us. And it automatically like dropped it down even, right? All we need to do to set this on is click the little eyedropper, which personally, I thought your cursor would stay the eyedropper. It seems like it's a little glitchy, but trust that it is. And then all we're going to be doing is pointing over here in where the pink is and clicking. Right? And that should automatically apply that. And now if we go back to the beginning of this clip, it is going to look a little weird because even though we keyed it out, there is some kind of artifact stuff happening. So I would still have some sort of like transition here at the beginning. It could be whatever you want. So you can manually put in a transition, you know, or one thing you could do also is like use opacity as a transition manually. So like we could turn on the opacity mode and put it at 0. And then just go into this like, you know, 1 second maybe. Right. And then we can change that to 100% opacity. And so that's, you can kind of see that on the timeline. It looks like that's similar to Audition. These different, what do you want to call them? Waveforms that are kind of overlapping down here that Anthony was mentioning. I guess you can look at those different ones and use the pen tool there, but yeah, so this will allow it to fade in. But I will note one thing here. This Ultra key that we just did, it has a toggle as well. So we don't need to actually have it just be 1 the entire time. So for instance, like, you know, like right here when we start to see her eyeballs, maybe I have that as a marked point on the timeline. So markers are definitely helpful. If you have a clip selected and you hit M on the keyboard, it's going to put a marker on that clip. But if you don't have anything selected, right, you deselect everything, and you're just moving the playhead, I want you guys to get practice with this. You can hit M on the keyboard and you get that marker to pop up there. And the reason I missed this earlier in our page, right? Somewhere on our exercise page. Think of this as a helpful way for you guys to apply your audio later, right? When you drop your audio track in here, as your audio is playing, right? Maybe you can hit M on the keyboard, like a beat to a drum or something, right? And after you have that kind of set, you could use these markers as points of reference to where you cut things, right? Maybe you switch clips using those markers. But this is where, and you can hold Shift as well to snap to the markers, which is really nice. I'm going to say that right here where we see her eyes, I want this key color to change. And I want it to change literally the next frame. So I'm not going to change the pink right here. I'm going to leave the pink up till that frame. And then if I go over with my keyboard key one frame, I could then add a new keyframe and change the color to something else. Right? And so now if I play this back, we should see the background kind of normal, and right when we see her eyes, it should flicker. Oh, I didn't even hit render, but. Oh, see how mine's getting slow here? This is what I've been waiting for. So if you guys get to a point where you have this slow thing happening, number one, when's the last time you've saved? Because you can end up having the program crash and who knows if it'll recover, right? But what I want to show you right here is something that anybody can also do wherever you're working right now. I want you to go to like the place where you are trying to make a change. Like right here, I made this change with her eyes switching the key color. And I started my input, right? My marking in point, and then my marking out point. And why this is helpful is because you could then use those in and out points that you've set to go up to sequence, and we can render in to out. So if you're not familiar with what rendering is, it's a way for the program to kind of like softly export that selection that you have that you're working with so that you can play it back and see it as if what it would be when you're done, right? So if you do this like in this constraining way where you're limiting it to the in and out points, you don't have to render the entire video track every time you work on this. So what I usually do is I focus on rendering where it is I'm working to save time, like this render into out. Notice how it's taking a few seconds as is, right? And then it'll play back in like real time, that section that I was working on. Okay. You can right click and hit clear into out. It's a good question. I had to ask my other class actually, so I forgot. Mark into out, or wait, not mark. It's on autopilot there. Render into out. So there's a couple things I want to cover too, and I know class is over. Anybody have to run out the door? Something else? Okay, so you can check back on this video if you need to. I'll upload this as kind of like a, you know, project recap moments thing, like what are we doing for assignment kind of thing. Oh, let me go back and save that. I might come in here a second again and finish something, but I just want to note though that to finish the rest of this exercise, if you look on the exercise page here, I do want you guys to explore adding some other effects, not just the keyframe, not just the like ultra key, but like what are some other effects that you could throw on clips? And then I do want you to check out these two tutorial files. I literally just watched these to like learn how to do what it is I was showing you guys. So it's pretty easy to follow along with, as long as you're grasping like how to use the keyframing that I just went over, which they go over right here, right? But we covered the masking, like the green screening, or sorry, we covered the green screening. They cover masking in this as well. So you guys see here, like how it looks like there's a kind of like a mapped section here, you could totally do that and mask content out. And then you could also make your own custom like cropping effects. Like see how this lime looks like it's plunging in water. What they actually do is have that video clip unveil itself coming down. So instead of having like relying on a transition effect to do what you want to do, you could just apply an effect yourself using keyframing, right? Just like what we were just doing by having this character come up from nowhere. That's a transition, right? We made it. We didn't like click a button. I mean, we did, but it was a little bit more complex than that, right? So just make sure you're going over these. And then you just want to file export media. I mean, the options are there. This is pretty standard, but you could just follow that and then upload that. So all I really want you to do though, just so you're aware, is like 20 to 30-second clip. Not very long, right? It's like a third of your project, but just exploring options, because ultimately this is what you're going to need to be doing for your project. Get a sense of how the tools are working. As you work, if you have questions, write them down, right? Bring them to class and we can cover them. So this is going to be due. We also have the part 2 of the proposal due, right? And then we also have, holy smokes, can't navigate here. We also have sketches that are going to be due for Monday. So like ultimately when you guys come in, we'll have those, sketch talk sessions. And these are going to be a little bit longer than usual because this project's it's going to be pretty beefed out in terms of like overall complexity, but it's really just like a couple different things that we're talking about. Nothing's like too crazy. It's just like going over them step by step. So let's get to today's date, which would be helpful. Okay, so finish the exercise. You turn that in. And then make sure you're putting your storyboard photos online. So the storyboard is what I wanted to mention before you guys leave. Has anybody not done a storyboard before? Yeah, a few of you are probably new to video, right? So it's really just thinking about like different frames in time, right? If your track is going to be 60 seconds long, what might you be conveying over that time? And why is this like frozen? I think it's this video it links to.
I feel like effectively
it's
translate
a guy
them
who
into the images you
talks
want.
through how
And
he
what I've
cannot
drawn.
draw. And
Now in this shot, I also want the camera to push in.
talking
and
about,
I could draw a second closer pic
thinking
that
through
pushes
how
in from
motion
medium
might
to
happen.
close-up.
So there's a lot of things you could consider. It just depends on what it is you're doing with this abstract 60-second clip you're making for a project. What is it you're focusing on? You might show things like this, which might be like camera movement, or in our case, you could like zoom in on a 4K clip, right? So this could be conveyed like that. And he's showing scale, right? We only need something really tiny. That's the whole point, is like it's quick and simple. I swear that I have a second thing to show you guys. I feel like this is not loading. Let me close this, refresh this page. Sick. I'm going to go to the project 3 page and see if we have it on here. Sketch. So there is a folder to put the sketches in. Storyboard, nothing for storyboard. Let me just do a Google search. I don't know why my one link is not loading. So storyboard is literally like just fill a sketchbook page with some rectangles, right? And put some notes under. So don't do something like, don't fill the entire page. You want to leave like a little bit of space for a couple notes or an arrow, right? Pointing in. And you just say things like, camera is panning to the right, or whatever it is we're looking at. Are we crossfading things? You could talk about content. You could talk about effects. And the other part that I'm going to be adding to the project page for you guys to like put a part 2 of the proposal with is everybody got proposal done, hopefully. So what I want you guys to think about with this, and it's kind of like, it can be really complex if you make it that way, but that's why I'm having you do part 1, part 2. Take whatever it is that you're doing, and I want you to then apply some sort of social justice topic as like an underlying factor to this non-narrative work you're doing, right? And if I told you guys this all at the same time, last class, everybody would be everywhere. But what I want you to think about is like, you have a core kind of focus that your project should have